There we go. Okay, good afternoon or good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome participants to the virtual planning board meeting of February 28th. And I'd like to take a call to order right now to ensure quorum. Ms. Creighton.
Here.
Ms. Delicio.
Here.
Ms. Foley said she will not join us tonight. You're not with us, are you, Mary? Mr. Gilbert?
Yes.
Mr. Olney?
Here.
Ms. Tenney?
Here.
Okay, thank you. Looks like we have a quorum tonight. I'd like to remind all board members, guests, asked to be recognized by the chair if you wish to speak, and this meeting is being recorded. Our first items on the agenda was the acknowledgement of receipt of correspondence. The board received 5 pieces. City of Gloucester public hearing notice, Town of Wenham notice of certification of action, Town of Wenham notice of decision approved special permit. I guess there's 2 of those, and a letter on financial scoring from Lorraine Iavani. At this time, I would allow any public comments on items not on the agenda with a very limited time as we have a full agenda tonight. Does any from the public wish to speak? Sandy?
Hi, Sandy Rogers, 82 Old Essex Road. I didn't know about the public meeting that's scheduled for tonight at 7 o'clock, and I wanted to know where it was advertised.
Sarah, it was advertised in the Cricket.
It's advertised on the Cricket and posted on, I believe, Sharon confirmed that it was posted on the town websites.
Yes.
Well, it's sort of embedded in the weekly listing. I didn't see any notifications go out through social media or anything about it being a public meeting.
So I think the official channels are the ones that we control, which is the public notice in the newspaper, which is, so we don't control the social media stuff from the town.
Was it highlighted as a special meeting? I'm just curious.
There was a public notice as required by the zoning bylaw change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next item, any other public comments? The next item is the A&R for 6 Greenbrier Road. And we received an A&R a few weeks ago, and the applicant has sent a waiver to extend his request and present tonight the proposed A&R. Mr. Copeland, are you on? Or the representative for the applicant? Sharon, the applicant was supposed to appear tonight to present.
Yes, and I sent him a copy of the agenda. So with all of the Zoom meeting information. And I even talked to him on Thursday.
Okay, I will pass over this for now, and maybe towards the end he will appear, maybe after the public hearing, although we do have until 7 o'clock to before the public hearing. So next item on the agenda is the curb cut at 9 Lincoln Ave, continued from February 14th. At our last meeting, the board reviewed an application for a curb cut at 9 Lincoln Ave. Prior to discussion, member Delicio stated she was an abutter to the applicant and would vote if necessary. I determined that Ms. Delicio should not give any opinion on this as she was a direct abutter and goes against state ethics guidelines for a conflict of interest. At the end of the presentation, I allowed the neighbor to comment. The neighbor did not comment on the curb cut, but commented on the lack of granite curb on the street. Ms. Delicio then raised her hand to comment as a private citizen. I did not allow that. She asked for a determination by town council. To this, we received the following summary from town council. A planning board is presumed to have a conflict of interest as an abutter or near an abutter. The member must not participate in an official capacity. The Ethics Commission recommends that the member leave the meeting and not participate at all. However, the member is not required to leave, and if there is public comment, the member can comment as a private citizen. However, they do so at their own risk, as someone could file an ethics violation complaint as the member is acting outside of their official capacity. They would not be covered under town liabilities insurance. So I would like to give the opportunity now for Ms. Delicio to speak as a private citizen on this matter. Ms. Delicio, do you care to speak on this curb cut? I take that as a no. Okay,
Sorry,
so
having trouble unmuting. Well, now it's a bit out of context, so I'll wait and raise my hand if I need to time in the future.
okay, so have members viewed the curb cut on their own? At least last meeting, we were going to take a ride. People were going to go on their own, review the curb cut. Do members have any comments or concerns to ask on the proposed curb cut?
Ron,
Yes, Sarah.
two things, just in terms of process. It might be strategic just to ask if there's any other public comment, and then we can close that section. So if any other abutters wanted to speak, since we're uncustomarily allowing public comment on this issue, and then we can go around with the board, just as there may be other public comments just as a suggestion, and then we can.
Is there any other public comment? Okay, I don't think there is. Laura?
Yes, thanks, Ron. I did have a chance to go by the site and looked at it. And where the driveway is in now, because of the mix-up about the process, I was able to observe the paved sidewalk, which is in the public right-of-way. And my observations were that this doesn't have to do with the fact that there is a curb cut, but with getting the slopes on the sidewalk to be accessible and correct. And so the existing sidewalk, there is a structure kind of within the island, within the sidewalk adjacent to the island that's created by this U driveway. And that structure, which I assume is an existing height, the cover of that structure is a few inches higher than where the driveway ramps out to the street, and has created a little bit of a hump there. And so my concern is that there is now, although it's subtle and it's, in dry weather, it is not an accessible slope apparently to me looking at it. And so that the ramp there has created a condition which has made the sidewalk travel more difficult for people, and a little, potentially when it's icy, a little more difficult. I don't think it's a deal breaker with the curb cut being there. I just think that the sidewalk, if it was paid by this project, that needs to be corrected to smooth out that slope and make an accessible sidewalk.
Okay. Any other comments from the board?
Only that I would suggest, in fact, I'll be happy to move that we approve the curb cut, with an acknowledgement that the process was reflecting that the process should have come to us before the actual construction, and asking that the applicant remedy the sidewalk to the DPW's satisfaction.
Okay,
And Sarah,
so,
just to clarify that, I believe that it was accessible before, and so satisfaction would include that we make it accessible again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
And is there any way we can have any kind of financial, and at the owner's expense?
Right.
Okay, so there is a move to approve the sidewalk on the condition of smoothing out the, as described by Sarah and Laura, the hump. Is there a
Approve the curb
second?
cut. Approve the curb cut.
Approve the curb cut. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it, Ron.
Okay, but motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, I'll take a roll call vote on the approval with the condition. Ms. Tenney,
We didn't hear you.
Yes.
Ms. Hammond, Ms. Creighton,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert,
Yes.
Mr. Olney,
Yes,
and the chair votes yes. Okay, thank you. Is Mr. Copeland on? Okay, I will, since we're still have a bit 15 minutes before the public hearing, I would like to take the next item on the agenda out of order on the blasting regulations update. Sue Brown prepared proposed blasting regulations on February 7th and sent them on to Christine Delicio. I believe Christina gave you language from regulations from Sherborne. And where does this stand?
So I did
Sue?
add, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I did add the language for the from the Sherborne that Christina indicated she thought would be valuable. I highlighted in red. It is in the update in SharePoint, although I just put it in. I think it's in the zoning regulations as well, but I just went ahead and put it in today's folder as well. And I'll get to that and let me tell you what the changes are. Gave me one moment, I'll get that.
You want to share your screen there?
I can give that a try. Let me see if I can. One moment. One moment. I'm not very good at multitasking here.
Okay.
I can share it for you if you want.
Do you have the one with the red?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Thanks. Thanks, Sarah. So the only thing that was changed was the additional information about notification to abutters, which is in red, which would accompany
Sarah,
the
could you
permit
please enlarge that?
application.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just can't read.
That better.
Thank you.
So it's roughly, so included in the notification is a recommendation for abutters to conduct a baseline water quality sampling and analysis for select metals, et cetera. And then if you scroll down the other piece, and I've passed this on to the Board of Health, but have not heard back because I passed it on to them because it references that they would have a role in providing information. Further down, it says that the Board of Health would have a information sheet, a manufacturer's information sheet about the composition of the blasting agent shall be provided to the Board of Health. Right there under number 4. So I've passed that on to the Board of Health, but have not heard back as to their acceptance of that language. But
Have
otherwise,
we passed this on to the fire chief?
Yes, multiple times.
Okay.
He
Any
didn't have any
comments?
further he didn't have any further comments, no.
Okay.
So I would
Mr.
think
Gilbert,
that the
go
next
ahead.
step is to simply for the board to either discuss, make changes, recommendations, and or vote to approve it as their regulations.
Okay, Mr. Gilbert,
Sue, could you scroll back up to the first block of red text? There's a recommendation that abutters would conduct a baseline water quality sampling. How is an average citizen supposed to do that?
isn't that the applicant should be doing that for abutters?
So the applicant generally is responsible for that within a certain, I think it's 250 feet according to state regulations. This is a notice that if you lived within 1,000 feet that you would have the option of doing it. Sometimes that is the responsibility, sometimes it could be the responsibility of the applicant, but it's by state law, it's not. So this is something that I think it would be good for the board to discuss about what the distance is that's reasonable and whose dime it should be on.
Well, the verbiage abutters to conduct is pretty absolute. And unless they have money or a scientist in the family, you know, it's
Of course.
seems like the language needs to be changed.
Laura?
I'm looking at that same section and I'm concerned that if I got a notice as an abutter that I recommending that I conduct a baseline water quality sampling and analysis for select metals, that I might be concerned, needlessly or not, that something was going to go wrong. I think this kind of frames it as if it's a problem when I think what we're, and you know, it may be or it may not be, but I do have a concern with just a notification that recommends that abutters get some testing on something that they may not, you know, understand very well. Most of us don't know if we need to test for metals because there's blasting going by. I think if there is a responsibility for metals or for vibrations or for whatever it is, it should be on the applicant to provide the necessary testing, and everything else should be a notification that that is happening and where to find the information.
Any other comments from the
People
board?
looked at it and weighed in, or just typical of the way we would notify and expect people to perform their own testing?
So we don't have, the town doesn't have, and most communities don't have regulations above and beyond the state's regulations. The state regulations, I believe it's 250 feet. So it's quite a lot less than the 1,000 feet that's recommended here. The language that I put in had said we would notify all landowners within 1,000 feet. The verbiage from Sherborne, which was in the red, indicated that not only are you notifying abutters within 1,000 feet, but making the recommendation that they have a baseline water quality sampling and analysis done. So
Yeah, I think
again,
that's gonna
it's
serve to
beyond-
alarm people.
yeah.
Sorry, Sue, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, it's beyond what the state requires, but in an effort to be thoughtful about those who are having concern and want notification, we expanded the radius of the notification, if you will, and just in an effort to provide more information. But I don't disagree that it might be alarming people who may not need to be alarmed, and also it could be a cost burden to have it done. And frankly, I don't know the cost of a water analysis, but I'm happy to check that out.
Would the board want to get a chance to review this and bring it up at our next meeting, and then maybe get some comments from the Board of Health in that time frame? Or would you want to? What's the?
Yeah, I
I think
think-
I'd like to do.
Yeah,
Go
that's a
ahead.
good, That's a good idea. I'm sorry, I lost, when I shared my screen, I lost my ability to raise my hand, sorry.
Okay.
But I have two comments. One is that this blasting regulation does seem to move us forward because it prohibits percolate or whatever the chemical is down lower. So I would like to review this more. But the other thing to the sort of echo, so that down here it says blasting shall not include perchlorate. So that's seems to be one of the chemicals that's of concern. Everything else seems to me to be very retroactive. So, and I think that the issue around how abutters are notified could be, first of all, could be solved by providing a sample letter to abutters, because it's going to be the same every time. That would explain the issue and say, if you are concerned, you could pre-test before the blasting by taking a water sample and taking it. There's the place in Gloucester, I think, does water testing. I can't remember the name of it. It's right there at the circle, and not the circle beyond. But anyway, we can find out that. The other thing that people might want to do if they are close to a blasting site is to have their insurance agent do a foundations analysis. And I believe a lot of times your insurance agent will just come and do that for you, but again, how does that happen? But my concern is that that all you're doing, you're protecting yourself in that case to say, oh, look, the chemicals in my water that are now there and my crack in my foundation that's now there weren't there before. That's what you're doing with these measures as a homeowner. So that's a good advice. But I think our larger intent is to prohibit chemical water contamination, not prohibit, prevent water contamination. And hopefully what's buried here is this prohibition of perchlorate. So that's good step in that direction. And I'm just wondering if there are any other measures. So I think that we might want to move the prohibition of perchlorate up higher in the regulations, since if that is a common chemical, I don't know anything about blasting. And then lastly, I will say that the high school had blasting when we did it, and the project paid for all of the foundation surveys of a whole lot of houses in that neighborhood because of the proximity to the blasting sites. And so I just want to, and I think that was, given the scale of the project, and actually the case there was not so much blasting, but pile driving, which has can have a similar effect when you're on bedrock, but that's not what we're talking about. So anyway, I think your suggestion, Ron, to think a little bit more about this, I think this moves us forward. So I appreciate Sue's work on it.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Sarah.
I just wanted to respond about being reactive and helping the landowner out, to make sure nothing happens after the fact, or to have proof of what might have happened after the fact. I think generally the reason that we don't have thou shalt nots are in here is because it's all covered under the state regulations. So short of just, reiterating all that information, I think what we're trying to do is really to get the information out to people and to, to provide that information as much as possible. Because I think the feeling mostly is that the state does an adequate job, maybe with the exception of the number of abutters that are provided for. So, that's it.
Thank you, Sue. Chris, Mr. Only.
So I just have two questions. One, isn't perchlorate already banned by the state? It's probably fine to restate it in the regulations, but I don't think you can use it anyway. And then my other question is, what water do you test? Is it your drinking water, or is it, do you dig a hole in the ground, find some water and test it? I'm kind of curious about that.
It's a good question, because a lot of people get
Yeah,
tap
sure.
water from this town.
Right.
So it's a well.
So maybe we should
Okay,
say
yeah,
if you have a well, maybe if you have a well, maybe you should get your water tested before and after. That might be.
And Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think perchlorates are banned currently, correct? I mean, that was the whole.
The information that I got from the fire marshals was not that it was banned, although it may not be used. So I couldn't find someone who knew specifically whether it's used or not.
Okay. Christina?
So I think there's the general concern. So if you are in a tight neighborhood such as the high school, 250 feet is going to be sufficient. But if you're in a more rural area, you need to expand that. And then we need to be considerate of the wells. And so that is exactly the reason. Yes, you're testing the wells. And the little bit of data that's out there is suggesting that we need to be a little bit cautious. And we already can have a bit of issue with our water as it is. So if we want to talk about changing this to the blasting, putting the onus or the opportunity to have the contractor, the blasting contractor, pay for this within 1,000 feet, that's completely acceptable too. But I think we're just trying to protect the residents that may be, affected by this aquifer and the disruption of the aquifer. That's it.
Okay, thank you. And Laura?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between the 1,000 feet and what that governs, and whether it be vibration and foundations or water quality. This needs to be science-based. We should not just be giving arbitrary dimensional requirements that may or may not relate to what we're doing. So, if a project was having to pay for 250 feet diameter before, and now they're going to 1,000 feet, let's just make sure that there's a reason to do it. And if we have an environmental engineer or a geotechnical engineer who can help us with this question, I think we need to get a professional opinion, because otherwise it's fine to notify people 1,000 feet out, but to require or even recommend testing that may only alarm people may or may not be necessary. Let's just tie it to the prevailing science and not try to invent it ourselves.
Okay, thank you. What if we put this document, Sue, on our meeting packet for the March 14th, allow members to comment on it, and then have a process where we discuss the comments at our next meeting? Would that be acceptable to the board? And hopefully we'd hear from the Board of Health in that time frame.
Sounds good to me.
Is the board on board with that?
I will see if I can get an opinion from a geotechnical engineer. I'm guessing it's going to be largely dependent on what the underlying bedrock is and what the conditions are. So it will be hard to make a blanket statement about that, but I'll see if I can't document a little bit more consensus on the area that is typically protected.
Okay, so we'll move this to our next meeting for further discussion. Okay, thank you. Okay, good timing, 7 o'clock. So just give you a little preamble to the hearing tonight. This little background for the public. The board was approached by a potential laboratory developer asking us to revise our regulations for the LCD to make it more practical for laboratory usage due to their specific needs. The board has agreed in principle to modify certain sections of our current law. We are here today to present specifically what bylaw changes we are proposing, open a public hearing for public comment, close the public comment session, and then discuss it and take a vote. We will have Gary Gilbert present the specific proposal, and Vice Chair Sarah Creighton will moderate the public comment portion of the meeting. Once the planning board members finish with their presentations, the public will be invited to participate with questions and comments. Public may submit their questions via Zoom by using the raise hand feature. Just some guidelines to all participants to respect each other, whether you disagree or not. No personal innuendos or attacks will be tolerated. Please keep your remarks focused on specific topic and issues being discussed. And please refrain from repetitive questions asked or comments made previously, so everyone has the opportunity to present different points of view and or information. At this time, I would like to open the public hearing on modifications to the limited commercial district. The public hearing notice has been duly noticed and advertised in the Cricket. The modifications include to amend section 4.4.6 to expand the areas within the limited commercial district that allow laboratory uses by special permit only to include the area east of School Street. 2, to remove redundant language concerning special permits for uses in the LCD and use the general special permit language. 3, to amend section 5.5 to allow greater building height for commercial buildings in the LCD. 4, to amend sections 5.7.1, 2, and 3 to make changes to the lot width, lot coverage, and setback requirements within the LCD. Again, I will chair the meeting. Gary Gilbert will present specific details of the recommended regulation changes. Sarah Creighton will moderate the public discussion period. The public comment period will then be closed and the board will discuss this issue. I'd now like to take a vote of planning board members to open the public hearing. Ms. Tenney.
Yes.
Mr. Olney.
Yes,
Ms. Creighton.
Yes,
Mr. Gilbert.
Yes.
And Ms. Delicio. Christina?
Yes.
I think that was a yes.
Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Yeah, can hear you now. We heard a yes. Okay, at this time, I would like to have planning board member Gary Gilbert give a presentation of specific details, after which Sarah Creighton will moderate the public discussion period. Mr. Gilbert,
Okay, I can share my screen.
I believe so.
Okay, let me just adjust. Sorry about this guy here.
Mushroom Man.
He's hard at work. Okay. This is a map I generated showing what the limited commercial district is. We talk about it a lot. It's kind of an abstract area in town in a lot of people's minds. I think this makes it pretty clear. Route 128 is the yellow line that runs east to west, basically. And School Street is, I'm tracing it with my cursor. Can you see my cursor, Ron?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so that's School Street and Pine Street goes up. And I guess it's called, I think once it crosses 128, that's when the nickname Pipeline Road comes into play. That's in our bylaws. So this is the extension of Pine Street where we currently allow certain land uses. And you can see that less than half of the limited commercial district is what we're talking about, allowing certain uses. So the background to all this is that the town needs increased revenue. That was established pretty clearly in our master plan. It was easily 16 major capital projects that were identified. There's I think we have to contribute to the Essex school that they're going to be building. There's infrastructure issues with our sewage plant. Decisions haven't been made, but we know that there's big costs in our horizon, as there are for sea level rise and climate resilience, and then our town facilities. So currently, the allowed land uses in the LCD that require a site plan review. So these are uses that require just that the planning board review their site plan development. They were things like the professional offices, the family medicine building, a very vital facility in our town, as is the Manchester Athletic Club. heavily used facility. And on our publicly owned land there, the compost facility has been functioning for years. There are some other uses that are allowed, but we haven't seen any of them, such as photovoltaic and marijuana facilities. In the existing law, it allows certain other land uses, and they require site plan review and a special permit from the planning board. Special permit means basically special permission. Laboratories is the main one that we're talking about, but also certain types of scientific research facilities and light manufacturing. Sorry for the light bulb image, but it's actually kind of funny. Land uses not allowed in the LCD. We should be really clear that the uses that are allowed are allowed. Everything else by exclusion is not allowed. So there's nothing to do with residential there, or retail or gas stations, or a myriad of other types of land uses. So what about special permission? So based on our current laws, to grant a special permit, the planning board in this case they have the right to review every aspect of the project and to impose any kind of conditions they see fit. And the planning board is required by our law to get comment from the Conservation Commission, Department of Public Works, the Board of Health, and any other boards or committees that we see fit. Typically, the ZBA and the planning board send it out to many boards besides just those three committees. The applicant has to pay all fees regarding this. And very often, the planning board or the zoning board would hire a peer reviewer or an outside expert, a third-party expert. And we are required to act based on state law in a certain timeframes. So a summary of the bylaw changes that so far in principle, we feel seems reasonable, would be adding this additional area to where the labs are allowed. As I showed in the map, it's the area east of School Street on the right-hand side of the map that I showed earlier. To allow increased building heights due to the realities of having a lab land use. In any district, they need higher floor-to-floor heights. Allow some height higher than you would for a residential structure for mechanical equipment on the roofs of these lab buildings. And to decrease the requirements for lot width, which right now are quite wide, 500 feet, lot coverage by buildings and impervious surfaces. And finally, it allows us some flexibility to negotiate setbacks from property lines, which has been a big encumbrance. For example, on the doctor's offices there had real trouble with the setbacks requirements from the property lines, and setback for parking and buildings from Route 128. The special permit granting authority would not vary those setbacks unless there was some gain or some purpose for it to benefit the town.
Excuse me, Gary, I'm gonna have to interrupt you because Ron, I've got Alan Wilson on the phone. We have a problem with our Zoom link. So sorry to interrupt, but the agenda, and I've lost my ability to get Google. So could somebody confirm that the agenda, sorry to do this, but that our agenda that's posted on the town website is working? And maybe, I'm not sure how we do that. Maybe what I should do is sign off. What I think I'll do, if with your permission, Ron, is actually,
What?
Sarah,
yeah.
I checked the agenda on the town website earlier, and that is where I got the Zoom link from, was the town website.
I did too.
I did too.
Says,
Yeah,
I just
saying, we're saying Erica Brown is saying you have to manually copy it into your browser. Were you
I
able to
think
do that?
working, but the mobile tap is not working yet, so maybe
I just joined through the website, the town website.
Okay, so it sounds like other people are, okay, I'm gonna talk to Alan and let Gary continue. Sorry.
someone's putting in the chat. Yeah, you have to you have to manually enter it. You can't or copy it. You can't just tap it.
Yeah, that's how I logged in today. I always go to the town website and just click the link.
I
Yeah.
could not get the link to work. I had to put the code and the password in.
I clicked the link, worked fine.
Yeah, for me
Me
too.
too.
Ron, may I continue?
Me too. Clicked on it. Maybe they clicked on it in the PDF, then it doesn't work.
Okay, sounds like people have been able to get in through the link. I don't know what this other issue may be, but it sounds like the town one is working. So Gary, why don't you continue?
I just ask a question. Where else would you get it besides the PDF?
I think there's a live link on the town
There's a
website.
live link on the town website,
you-
and then it's in the agenda as well.
Yeah, if you scroll below the agenda, it's right there. You just have to scroll down. Maybe people missed that.
Thanks.
All right, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's important that we know that people can get in.
Okay. So now we get into the actual text of the bylaw changes. The other slides have bigger fonts, so they're easier to read, but we felt it was important to include all of this section 4.4 here, so bear with me, please. Basically, this section of the bylaw that we're talking about changes, these early parts all the way, everything above 4.4.6, that's where we say what is allowed to be, what land uses are allowed with a site plan review, the businesses, et cetera. 4.4.6 refers to what we allow to be built there with site plan review and with a special permit. And right here, this blue text refers to the area east of School Street. And then there's quite a bit of redundant language here that we suggested excluding, removing, because for a variety of reasons. One of the problems with our bylaws in general is that there's an awful lot of redundancy in them. This first little part here, we say at the beginning of the bylaw section that you have to get a special permit. And then we go and repeat that right here by saying, and you have to follow section 7.5 of the bylaws, for example, and that is the special permit section. So that's unnecessary language. This item A here refers to that the special permit granting authority is going to refer the project for comment by the Conservation Commission, the Board of Health, the DPW, et cetera. That's already explicitly mandated in our special permit law. So again, that's redundant. The expenses incurred for the project, that's explicitly, we explicitly have the right to charge peer review expenses and such to the applicant. That's normal and standard, and it's never contested. Item C talks about requiring that the applicant file special annual filings if they're using any regulated substances. But that's also redundant to the special permit granting authority to review the project. And we're going to hire an outside reviewer, and we're going to follow their recommendations as well as recommendations from the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board. Sorry, the Conservation Commission, the DPW, and the Board of Health. They'll all be giving input as well as the peer consultant. And you don't want to just invent a report when if the federal government or the state's not requiring a report, then if you generate one, what are they going to do with it? And item D is, Christine, I'll get you in a second because you raised your hand. The item D refers to section 4.9.6.5, which is the Water Resource Protection Overlay District. And it basically says you have to follow the rules in that section of the bylaw, but you already have to follow those rules because this whole district falls into that Water Resource Overlay Protection District. Before I go to the next slide, Christine, did you want to make a comment?
I do. It's actually about the access again. So I actually followed the link, tapped it from my phone from the Agenda Center, and it takes you there. And Mr. Copeland actually put a note somehow into our agenda that he could not get in. He can hear us, but he doesn't know how to raise his hand on the phone, and the link isn't working properly. So before we go any further, I just need to think that we need to make sure this. I just tried from the Agenda Center, click the link, and it takes you to a Word document. And like I said, Mr. Copeland has actually altered the agenda somehow and sent us a message within it.
Ron?
Well, I'm going to have to I think this Greenbrier Road we will do after we get through the public hearing. So maybe he could get connection by then. But I'd like to continue with the explanation here, Gary.
I'm almost done, so bear with me. This section of the bylaw should be easier for you to read the text. This is where the modification would allow for the lab uses to go up to 55 feet in height in the limited commercial district. And it also allows for the HVAC equipment to be on top of the roofs if needed. Again, this is all reviewed by under the special permit. This section here, 5.7, we're suggesting to delete the 500-foot minimum width of the lot. And we're talking about modifying the maximum areas covered by buildings and by impervious surfaces, which is always an important regulation in our laws, to 40%, 60%, which is very standard for commercial districts in towns. That's a more normal requirement. Again, we want to encourage this use, but we want to regulate it through a special permit process. And then the setbacks, it touches on the setbacks from property lines that the planning board, if they see a benefit to the town, could vary the suggested requirements there at 150 feet and 100 feet. And finally, this is the area where, again, there's another setback referred to as a setback from Route 128. And this allows the planning board to more or less negotiate a variance from the setback requirement. And that's the end of my presentation. Did you want to go back to any slides, anybody, or should we just continue?
I think at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Sarah to take public comment.
Okay, first of all, I would like to, anybody who's listening on the phone, I think if you copy the link into your browser, that will get you to the Zoom link. I'm also going to suggest that we probably extend our comment period in some way, perhaps. I'm not sure. We can talk about that at the end. Okay. Are there comments from the public? Oh, Alan has made it. Great. I see Sandy. Please, when you have comments, please state your name, your full name and address for the record in a slow manner so that our administrator can get that. Sandy?
Okay, great. Thank you. Sandy Rogers, 82 Old Essex Road. These changes, I understand, are being put forth very quickly to be part of the town meeting this spring. And I would like to know if there has been a study done on the LCD and the impact on the environment. As stated in Gary's introduction, this impacts our watershed dramatically. And the amount of, increasing the amount of impervious surfaces, the height of some of these buildings and the height within the LCD can go to extreme levels due to all of the rock surfaces. I understand that the developer even says that some of the places are above 128 feet to start with, and then you would be allowing building above that. So, has there been an environmental study to understand if there should be some allowances like this? Are there particular sections of the LCD that are more vulnerable, and there should be potentially maybe some smaller overlays, which has been discussed previously multiple times during the LCD reviews that had gone on last year? What has been done by the board to look at this entire LCD area? what environmental studies, what other studies have been done regarding the impact on the town, on the traffic, et cetera, et cetera. Not seeing that. Thank you.
Okay, so do you have a specific comment on the regulations?
As for a specific comment, I think that this is being pushed through very quickly, and that studies need to be done, especially environmental studies regarding what should be allowed before you start changing any of the regulations to allow for greater surfaces, for greater height, for the amount of I'm trying to find the right word, but the amount that should be allowed by way of traffic and population that should be allowed into this area. What can the infrastructure handle in this town?
So, thank you for that question. We're trying to get comments on the specific regulations, and they're not comments on any particular project. So if
the comments have to do with allowing for greater impervious surfaces, for greater heights.
We heard your comment.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
there are two responses. This is simply the changes in the regulations, and it is not comments on a specific project. And as Mr. Gilbert stated, any specific project would have site plan review or site plan review and special permit, which is when the questions you're raising would be asked.
Well, no, I think.
Excuse me. We're done. You asked a question, I'm going to answer it, and then we're going to give somebody else a chance. So the second thing is that the higher height is a way to reduce impervious surface. So you build more of your square footage up and down rather than across the land. And that is one important way that you reduce impervious surface. But to your answer, we have not done studies of any particular project because we do not have a project before us. And that would be the time to take a look at that. And the board has, for many years, as well as the master planning committee, looked at and articulated goals to increase the use of the LCD. And thirdly, this is in zone 3 of our watershed. And as Gary mentioned, there are significant water protection. There's a whole section of the bylaw that addresses the water resource areas.
I do want to state that there is
I'm going to mute you if you keep interjecting. That is I'm going to give somebody else a chance. Does anybody else have
comments? You didn't understand my question, and I wanted to be able to state that correctly. So is there someone else with their hand up?
We'll come back to you if we don't have other comments later in the evening. Do I have other comments? Help me, board members, please, or Ron in particular, Laura, help me look for other hands up.
Yeah, Jeffrey Bodman Turner
Yeah.
has a hand up.
Okay, Jeff, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I had one question of clarification and one question related to some of the deletions in the existing bylaw. Just to clarify, changes in setback and lot coverage, those are by special permit only? Is that included only under special permits? And the second question that I had to do with Gary's explanation for pulling out the references to other parts of the bylaw, which for someone who's looking at the bylaw, who's not familiar with it, certainly not as familiar with it as Gary and other members of the planning board are, may be incredibly useful information to have. So when you delete that out, they may not know where all the regulations for special permits are. And some of the other things that were referenced and pulled or recommended for deletion. That's my comment, and I appreciate an answer to the question about whether setbacks and lot coverage are special permit only or just with site plan review.
Gary, can you respond to that? Or Chris?
Yes, I have to find my text of the law. The setback requirements from the lot lines may be reduced by special permit from the planning board. That's explicitly stated. It's not, as far as references to where to go in the bylaw, one doesn't write bylaws that way. You require a special permit, and there's a section in the bylaw regarding regulating special permits. If you're trying to get a permit from the building inspector, he'll walk you through our bylaws and show you where to go. And certainly any lab facility, any sophisticated facility, commercial facility, office facility would have a consultant, and they would know bylaws pretty well. So it's the applicant's responsibility to respond to the sections of the bylaw, and the building inspector is there to help. I don't know if that answers everything.
Can I state that a little differently, Gary? One of the things that this is in a larger part of is to try to simplify, make our bylaws clearer. And so independent of this LCD changes, we had identified those sections of 4.6 as being redundant with other sections of the bylaw, which govern special permits. And so this is an opportunity to clean that up at the same time. But I think you make a good point that as we present this, we should show people where it is redundant, which is, I think, what you're saying. And I think that's a good suggestion for.
Okay.
I see a question. Sue Mittermeier.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm sorry that I'm not on camera. I'm just traveling at the moment and wanted to make this as clean as possible. So just a general comment. I am hoping that the limited commercial district's eventual development, if that's decided, will not affect many of the trees that run along the 128 that create a buffer and make up part of our green infrastructure in town. And so I guess my question is, so that's my comment. I hope that that's not going to affect the trees along with the 128, which create a terrific buffer for sound and green infrastructure. And is there anything in the plans at the moment to make sure that those trees remain in place?
So again, we're not talking about any specific application. So we can't speak to whether anybody's initial application does anything to the trees along 128. That said, certainly, I think speaking for a number of the board members here, that is an important resource that is well known, and that would be a consideration in a special permit process. Any other board members want to answer anything there?
I could just add, Sarah, that it does have a setback requirement, which is way greater than the current MAC is situated. If you look at the aerial view of the MAC, it's surprisingly close to the 128. And as I said previously, there's a setback requirement of, I think it's 200 feet, if I remember correctly. And we wouldn't, we would not vary from that unless there was a benefit to the town. That's just how a special permit granting authority would act.
Sarah, I can
Thank you.
follow up.
Sorry, I've lost my.
Should I go ahead?
Go ahead, Laura.
Okay, I can also save this for when we planning board members comment, but I do recognize that resource as well. And there may be different ways to address it, either from creating an overlay, kind of a scenic overlay from 128, perhaps with design standards as have been discussed and considered in other studies for the LCD previously done. I think there are a number of methods that the board can consider, and Gary's right about there having to be a benefit, but there could be multiple benefits and they may be sometimes in conflict with each other. So I think it is an important resource, and I expect we'll continue to talk about how to best protect it.
Okay. Other people with their hands up who have not yet spoken? If I'm missing your hand, please just, and you haven't yet spoken, please.
I don't
Anyone,
see any
Sarah?
others, Sarah.
I'm sorry, who?
I don't see any others.
Okay. I'll come back to you, Sandy. Do you have a new comment?
Yes, there was one section about annual testing that was deleted because there was something in the permitting process, but a permitting process would happen once versus an annual testing that would need to be done. I wanted to make sure that the annual testing is retained in the bylaws.
Okay. Thank you for that comment. I think that the original intent was an annual reporting, not testing. Is that correct, Gary? Can you share your screen again?
Yes, it was. Oh, share my screen.
So while he's doing that, we have talked about the fact that things like the Toxic Use Reduction Act and fire regulations and other kinds of regulations might be required, and that the planning board doesn't have expertise on toxics or what were the issues that and that we were not the right place to have to receive an annual permit, an annual report, and that it was already covered with other state regulations was our assessment. So that's how we came to that. But
Does
we appreciate your comment.
Yeah, does that go to the zoning? Like, does that go to the town? Like, does that get accommodated somewhere else if you get rid of it?
Can I try to address this, Sarah?
We're trying.
Go ahead, Gary.
People may be surprised, but even the MAC is reporting to the state on an annual basis for certain activities they have, and that's not written in our bylaws. You have to, no one's going to sort of miss something that's important. If they're using anthrax, we're not going to miss the fact that they have to do follow certain regulations. There are a bunch of state and federal and environmental regulations and reports that need to be made with all sorts of agencies like the fire department and different state and federal regulations. And that's why we hire a peer reviewer, because they know what needs to be required. We don't anticipate anybody using seriously hazard materials there, but whatever materials they'll use, we have to rely on experts and peer consultants, as well as the Conservation Commission. They're not going to sort of overlook things like that, as would the Board of Health. They're all paying attention, and they're all going to make some pretty specific recommendations. And it's the job of the Special Permit Granting Authority, the Planning Board, to put it all together into one series of requirements for them to grant the special permit. So I feel pretty secure with that in mind.
But we thank you for that comment.
Thank you.
Sue Mittmeyer, any other comments, or you just have your hand up still?
I think she said something in the chat that she was.
Put her address in the chat, I see, because she didn't state it when she was speaking.
Okay.
I can look it up.
Yeah, we got it. 38 Street.
It's 38 C Street.
Okay. I don't see any other comments. I am going to ask Alan for his advice as to whether he thinks that there should be some, that this meets the requirements of the public hearing. Do you have any concerns, Alan? We just want to know them now before we
Well, that's not really my expertise, but I would suggest, given the problems people had with connecting, that it would probably be a good idea to continue the public hearing if you can, given the time limits, and have another session where everybody is given full access without any problems. I think you have enough time between now and April 25th to do that, but I'm not sure.
I think we do. The warrant closes on March 18th. And so we have to make a recommendation prior to that. So
Yeah, I would suggest that if that's feasible, given the time constraints, that you continue it and make sure everybody who wants to be heard has given proper notice, full notice and an opportunity to express their opinions. That'll take that potential defect away.
and is putting it on our meeting agenda and perhaps on social media that it was continued sufficient, or do you think we're going to need to have a post it again?
I would post it again. Always turn square corners when you have to.
We need 2 weeks
Need
of
3
postings. So this may be problematic because our next meeting's March 14th. So it would have to be after that because that would be 2 weeks.
Well, I would certainly defer to town council if she gives you different advice. This is not my particular expertise. So I would consult with her and see what she thinks.
On the fact that we continue this.
So we can make the 2 weeks if we get it into tomorrow's paper.
No, you can't. It comes out on Friday.
I don't
Not
know.
gonna be.
Anyway, we can figure that. So let's maybe we take a motion to at least continue to.
Excuse me, I see another person who wants to comment.
Okay, thank you. Rick Rogers, you have a comment?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, and just state your name and address, please, in case your name's not.
Rick Rogers, 82 Old Essex Road. So I understand you guys are going to talk about this subject after concluding the public hearing today. I just feel like zoning changes have a lot of teeth, but they're not all that fun to talk about, right? So I think a continuance here is a good idea. I understand the time pressures and all of that, but I don't think springing this on the townspeople at town meeting with the implications that this thing could have, right? I know we're not talking about specific projects, but you're opening the door to an entirely different way of thinking about this area. So I think that taking the time and doing this right is more important than trying to meet a town meeting in I know it's coming up, but I just think that the town really needs time to absorb this, think about it, and react to it versus showing up on a Monday night and making a decision.
Thank you.
So Sarah, I don't know if we need 2 weeks. We're continuing the meeting. My point is we would have 2 more ads and 2 more papers before the meeting on the 14th. So we're continuing. So I don't know if we need the full 2 weeks is my point. I'm saying we have 2.
It's already been advertised once.
Exactly.
I'm not understanding why we have to advertise it again.
Because because it wasn't a hard link. It wasn't a hot link in the agenda center. So people who clicked on it had trouble. If our town moderator had trouble, I have concerns. We just don't want it. There's no reason to have a protest that this is improperly posted. So I will just.
I'm a pretty good moderator, but I'm not a technical wizard.
I would like to just comment to the meeting that the planning board has been discussing zoning changes at all of our meetings for many months. And we invite you to continue to come to our meetings to hear this fascinating topic. The website will soon have the draft, many fascinating zoning changes posted there in draft form for you to look at in advance of the town meetings. And that town meeting has been postponed from April 4th, which would be its customary date, to April 25th. So, and then probably most of these fascinating zoning changes will take place at a second town meeting in June. Is that right, Alan? That's the general.
That is exactly right. And the selectmen have not picked a date for the second town meeting in June. It will be sometime in June, but we don't have a firm date yet.
Mhm. And then secondly, going back, just to reiterate, the planning board has actually been talking about zoning changes for many months, including the LCD work and the specifics. And we've been trying to follow the process of public notices and so forth. So Ron, do you think take a continuance till March 14th?
Excuse me, Sarah,
And
Becky
just
has her hand up.
just one last, okay, can we just close out this idea of the continuance to March 14th, but we may have to, and say if necessary, to March 21st. We may have to put it in the warrant prior to closing out the public hearing, which is allowed.
We already have a public hearing on the 14th, but we could, it might be just better to do it on the 21st if that meets all the scheduling
We'll have to vote the
parameters. We'll have to
article.
figure that out.
We'll have to vote the article before the public hearing is closed. We'll have to vote it on the 14th. So let's, can I say, Becky, do you have a comment that's related to?
I do, if I
Okay,
may.
great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. I just wanted to address the concerns that about this being sprung on people. This has been actually discussed for quite some time, the uses of the LCD, and by quite some time, I mean, years. And it's certainly understandable how some people feel that it gets sprung unless you attend almost every single meeting, which is of all the boards. So that's kind of very difficult to do and certainly not expected. But just to reiterate, this has been discussed for many years now. And to reiterate that modifying the bylaws is not a carte blanche for anybody. You still have to have a special permit. And I just wanted to underscore those comments. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Beck.
Ron, I'm going to suggest that we do have Mark Blovsky here. Maybe he could at least advise us. I don't want you to speak necessarily on any specific potential projects, but the matter of not having a hot link in the agenda center. This is the challenge of working in Zoom here. And that's, do you think we need to post for the 14th, continue to the 14th, or do we need to wait till the 21st? So we have 2 weeks, two full notices.
Well,
what's your opinion?
My opinion is if this meeting was properly noticed, that you could tonight continue the meeting to another date without additional publication.
And so the additional publication would be a public courtesy.
Just as a public courtesy, right? But I certainly didn't have any difficulty with the link. I'll tell you, it's worse in Beverly than it is in Manchester.
Well, I think the question mark, though, is whether a notice that had a link that didn't work for everybody is adequate.
Well, the notice worked of the meeting, and then there was a mechanism for people to attend the meeting that was on the town's website. I think you should consult with town council. I don't want to give an opinion on this.
I agree with that. That's exactly what I thought, Mark. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Hi, it's
So-
Sharon. The meeting was
Sure.
posted on the link, and I went in through agendas and minutes, and the meeting came right up. I went through the calendar and clicked on today's date, and the meeting came right up. So I don't know why people are having such difficulty.
But I tried it more than once, Sharon, and couldn't get in. I got a link to an email or some kind of message from a voter saying he was getting a blank screen when I clicked on the link. I then tried to log in on the phone number, and the Zoom answering service kept misreading the meeting ID that I typed in. So there
Okay.
were multiple problems.
All right.
Okay, let's just
So
add.
let's continue.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's, are there any other public comment? Jeff?
I understand some of the concerns that are being raised about crossing all the Ts and dotting all the Is. But notification of the Zoom meeting is primarily meeting ID and password. The Zoom link is there for convenience. And I'm not sure what Alan's referring to when he said that he couldn't do it on Zoom link. But if you open up Zoom and put in the meeting ID and password, you'll get in.
So,
Didn't work for me 3 times, Jeff.
So Ron, maybe we should take a motion to continue to March 14th. And if we have to start over again based on town council, then we can hold it on the 21st.
I'd like to entertain a motion to continue the public hearing for the modifications to the limited commercial district to March 14th at 7 well, Sharon, we have the Cornerstone Church at 7, correct?
Yes.
So I would say 8 p.m. Does that
Yes.
make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so to 8 p.m. on March 14th.
So moved.
Any
I'll second it.
discussion? Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote, Ms. Tenney.
I'm not able to attend on the 14th, so perhaps I should abstain.
You can still
Okay.
vote to continue.
Okay, vote to continue then.
Ms. Delicio,
Yes.
Mr. Only,
Yes.
Ms. Creighton,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert,
I'll be on the West Coast, but yes.
okay, that's 2 out. And the chair votes yes. So moved. Okay, thank you, everyone. Mr. Copland, are you available?
Ron, from what I could read, I'm not sure if he knows how to speak while on the telephone. Can anyone help him out?
Sharon, have you talked to Mr. Copland on this? On How to
Yes.
get in?
I gave him the agenda. He said he was tech savvy, and I said, all you have to do is go to the calendar and click on the day, and then it'll bring you to the planning board meeting. And I said, just click on that and it'll bring you right in. I mean,
Okay, is it an issue to move this to the 14th, Sharon? The waiver he sent, can it extend through the 14th?
I will ask him for another one just to be on the safe side. I would
And-
prefer it to have another waiver with that date certain.
Okay, and can you have him talk to me or call me, and so I can get with him and go over this internet business?
Okay,
I will personally walk him through it.
Okay,
All right.
I'm
thank you.
happy to walk him through it. But he
Okay.
said he knew how to do it, so I said, okay.
Okay. I don't know if there's an issue with the getting on or what today, so. Okay, we'll move on. The planners,
Oh, sorry, Ron, can I just, I'm sorry, one other thing.
who's Sarah?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Two things. One is, given this conversation, we may have to have a March 7th zoning meeting, in which case we could take that A&R up at that time. We can talk about that later, but it's a possibility. The second thing, there's a comment in the chat that the board is not interested in getting comments. So if people feel that their comments are not received, I certainly invite you to send us an email as well, is another way to make your comments, and we certainly read all emails. So if you feel that you're not being heard, please feel free to send us correspondence.
Okay, I can see that. Okay, thank you, Sarah. Okay, so we'd like to move on to our next item on the agenda, and that is the planners report. Sue?
Hi.
That's something you want to brief us on?
I can brief you on that. So the planner's report is brief. Let me get it in front of me. So the open space and recreation plan just has a few items to close that out. One is the Open Space and Recreation Committee is working on a general vision statement. We're asking for letters of approval from the Board of Select. The planning board is done. It just needs to get on letterhead and signed. And then we're looking for the ADA assessment reports from the previous plan for open space parcels. The previous ADA plan that we did evaluated all of the active spaces, the beaches, the playgrounds, et cetera, but they didn't go out to the conservation parcels. So we just need to indicate that what is needed for those in terms of ADA, if anything. The Western Woods, no change, condition assessment is still underway. The local rapid recovery plan, the town has submitted applications for a placemaking plan, temporary shared economic development position, and off-season event series. The downtown parking study, we've received that draft scope from MAPC. It's in the SharePoint file under the downtown parking study. I'm looking to confirm with MAPC that they will be happy to present the scope and schedule and seek input on goals from the committee, from the board on March 14th. So I just want to confirm that that's happening. And we'll also invite the Downtown Improvement Committee, PED Committee, and others who might be interested in understanding more about and helping talk about and provide input on the goals of the study. The blasting guidelines was on there. It was just, we've already just talked about that. So that was all that I had on the planner's report.
Is there a funding deadline on the parking study?
So the parking study, we've asked for the 20,000 in the planning budget for the town's portion of that. We can very likely break it into components to have the MAPC do their portion, fund their portion as the beginning, so we can get started prior to town meeting.
Okay. Any comments from the board? Thank you, Sue.
Ron, I have a question for Sue.
Yeah.
I think at the last meeting we had suggested that we get some advice about some of these complicated A&Rs that we suspect are going to be coming forward. And we sent that to Mark Bobrowski. Have we heard anything back from him?
I have not heard back from him. But
I
I
think it
will,
would be good to push him on that so that we get those, that advice. Where those things are gonna come back, those ANRs are gonna come back to us.
I
or the-
will ask him if he can provide written comment.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Update on draft zoning bylaw changes and your meeting with the Board of Selectmen, Sarah or Chris. Could you give us a brief summary of how that went?
I thought the board had a number of questions, some of which we've heard tonight about the LCD and particularly around the deletion of the special permit review around the LCD. There was a number of questions about how accessory dwelling units that are existing would be treated. And they encouraged us to, in a timely way, get the draft of all of the changes up onto the website so people can see them. So we're working on that. And
Did we get an answer on whether we can have our own budget for town council?
no, I was going to bring that up under the other business. We did ask if we could have a budget for town council, and the board did not address it, but I followed up with Greg, and he said that if we wanted to have that considered, we should set it in, I think, in motion very soon. So I think the question came up that in prior years, and I don't know which prior years, the planning board had a budget for town council, so we could ask questions get a little bit quicker response, not have to go through the Board of Selectmen. And should we ask for that again? And I think if we wanted to do that, we should take that up at the end of the meeting. But to answer your question, Chris, do you have any other feedback from the Board of Selectmen?
No, I think you covered it. There were quite a few questions about accessory dwelling units, which I thought was interesting, and so we'll move on and take more comments when we get into that process.
Okay, anything on our bylaw changes coming up on that, or we just?
Yeah, I think we should hold next Monday for a working session. We still have, I think, thank you for those of you who have put issues using the line numbers in that document on the SharePoint site. I think we should go through those and make sure that we address them. Most of them are quite small, but hopefully people are using that process to review the documents that are there, and then we should get them up on the website. And I also think, based on the input we got from the Board of Selectmen, that the zoning changes require time for the public to work through and understand. And so I have updated the calendar, the SharePoint calendar, with some tentative dates. And I've scheduled in, 2 public hearings for these zoning changes. We may need more than that. And given tonight, we probably should have a margin of error for technical difficulties or other, and I'm hoping maybe we can have them in person, if that's another discussion. But so I would like to suggest that at least everybody hold next Monday for zoning changes, and Chris and I are going to put our heads together and we'll confirm whether we need it or not, but I think there's enough to do.
Okay, thank you. Gary, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very helpful, and I really would encourage that we get a draft of our current bylaw proposed changes out for the public to review. It's not done, it's not finalized, but we know that we're pretty darn close. And this has been asked for multiple times. And as you say, a lot of people, it's like Greek to look through bylaws. So I think they will need time to sort through it. So that's my vote. And I do hope we talk later about a budget for town council. We always had one the years I was on the planning board previously. And it's critical to the town to avoid lawsuits and to be fair to its applicants that we have direct access to counsel.
Thank you. Sue?
Thanks. Two things. The planning budget that I oversee has a professional services line item, and I'm happy to use that for town council requests. Yep. So and the second thing is the planning, the Board of Selectmen is hosting, has a meeting next Monday as well. And they are going to be doing their presentation of the MBTA communities multifamily housing presentation that they're required to do before May 2nd. So I don't know if you want to run afoul with that. I think it would be important that that board members are there for that, because ultimately the Board of Selectmen is required to have the meeting, but the planning board would be the one that the actual zoning should and would come from, I would think.
So that's on the 7th?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Can I,
Okay.
one last thing, Ron, and can I just suggest that stay tuned about when that next workshop's gonna have to be on the zoning? I agree with Sue that we don't want to conflict with that. So it may have to be the meeting after the 14th. Chris and I are gonna have to look at the calendar because we have a bunch of things, so we're gonna need at least one or two more workshop meetings. We'll work
With
to figure
Mark.
it out.
With Mark.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Next item is subcommittee and liaison reports. Just for the board's information, the Water Resource Protection Task Force had its first meeting on the 16th. Our next meeting is Wednesday, the 2nd at 4 o'clock. Basically, the first meeting consisted of everyone introducing themselves and who they were and what their backgrounds were. We talked a little bit about PFAS. We talked a little bit about taking a tour of the water treatment plant and the pump station by the DPW, offered to take members on a tour. They also broke up 6 key work assessment that they were looking for board members to take up on. Use and demand of drinking water, supply and sources of drinking water, effects of climate change, contaminants, citizen awareness and engagement, and town responsibilities and accountability. So members were asked to choose one or many of those to engage in. So stay tuned. I'll give you more updates after our meeting Wednesday. Does anyone else have any subcommittee or liaison reports or any questions on Water Task Force? Okay. I listened to the selectmen's meeting last week. I haven't seen this policy, but I believe a policy will be forthcoming on having the chair of each board decide on whether to hold hybrid meetings starting tomorrow, and determining whether we will stay on Zoom or actually start to meet in town hall. So stay tuned. I haven't seen an official policy yet from the selectmen, but I think that's coming our way. So I'll let you know on that.
Ron, Ann Harrison has her hand up.
Ann Harrison, sorry, can see that. Ann, go ahead.
Mute.
Yeah.
Yeah. To be clear, boards, the policy that we're considering will have the board allow the boards and applicants and their representatives present in person, but not the general public. And my feeling, so there will still be a dependency on Zoom. And my feeling is that that is likely to continue even after the state of emergency for the pandemic, that the intention will be to allow the public at least the choice of attending virtually. So we're faced with the Zoom crisis forever, as far as I know. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Ann. Any comments from the board?
Could I ask Ann a question?
Yes.
And we know our normal attendance at meetings and such, and there seems to be like a need to have a policy of some sort. If you have 33 people in attendance of your meeting and 1 or 2 or 3 have trouble logging in, and Jeffrey Bodman-Turner made the point that you don't need to have a quick link, you just need to have the correct address and it should work. It seemed to me like it worked pretty well. There has to be some sort of judgment that's allowable by the chair to consider the meeting, you know, to end the meeting and vote or whatever you need to do.
I guess all I can say is thank you for that suggestion. And as we work on our policy, we will certainly take the example of this meeting into consideration.
Okay, thank you. So the next item I have is our approval of regular meeting. Sorry, Jeff.
Jeff has his, yeah.
Sorry, okay. Jeff,
John, I'm trying to understand Gary's comment. Are you saying there needs to be a policy for technical difficulties?
I guess to some extent, yes. I mean, the chair, there's going to be odd things that happen, and this is going to be an ongoing thing. And, you know, with 2 or 3 people not being able to get in and 33 people in attendance, it seems somebody should be able to make a judgment call whether the meeting was legal, not challengeable. You could proceed and take care of business.
I think the fact that it was a public hearing puts a little more emphasis on making sure there's no chance for a protest or that we've dotted the i's and crossed the t's. That's I think is what I think Mr. Wilson was getting at.
But maybe council, there has to be some sort of opinion generated as to what you can and can't do. Don't you agree, Jeffrey?
Yeah, we can check with town council on this. I don't think it's a policy decision, but let me check with town council first.
Well, a reasonable judgment should be able to be made by the chair is what I'm positing, but.
I understand.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Ron, can I?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, since we have 3 members of the Board of Selectmen, but the chair here, and thank you for coming. This question of that we're going to talk about in a bit is the either use of Sue's administrative budget for town council on matters around, you know, A&Rs or other things. It's our opinion, it's our understanding that any use of town council currently must go through the Board of Selectmen. Is that if we use our, you know, either our future budget, I think the request to have a budget is to try to address timely, you know, and direct access to town council is really the request. So how can we, would the board be object if we use Sue's funds to get that direct access?
Through you, Ron, to Sarah, there is a policy of the Board of Selectmen that applies to all boards. You're aware of that. It's a cumbersome policy created in the dark ages of how fast we have to move now, like in the 90s, maybe even the 80s. Ann could correct me on that. She's the policy maven in our organization right now. But there would need to be a modification to the policy to allow direct access to the funds that that Sue Brown has. So we still haven't set our agenda for Monday, and we could take that up. I
Jeffrey,
appreciate your concerns. I
Thank you.
know that you need timely response. But we either have to modify that policy that exists or create an exception. It has to be done. So
Great, thank you.
otherwise we're all constrained by that policy.
Can I just point out one fact, that the zoning board and the planning board often have applications that are time constrained.
I understand.
That makes us unique regulatory body.
Okay, thank you. I think we've covered that. Next item I have is the approval of minutes. And now I was told today that only the minutes from January 10th were in our packets. Is that correct?
The 24ths are on SharePoint also. I put them there.
They are not in today's meeting, I don't believe.
Okay.
No, and then the 10th was just placed pretty much at meeting time. So I did not have time to review that.
So
So,
10th has a number of errors too that I have made a copy of it and with amendments. So there's a number of important omissions there in the 10th. I mean, the minutes are quite short. The Ms. Delicio, I'll just go through them. Maybe we can, was the one who reviewed the guidelines from Sharon on blasting, a couple of missing words. And then on Mark Bobrowski, we didn't ask him to come to the next meeting, but we asked Sue Brown to request a proposal. I took this right out of my PowerPoint for that night to review the strategy, review draft articles, attend 3 zoning meetings, and attend 2 public hearings. So this is in the SharePoint. I've added a copy. And there was also a comment on the A&R from Mr. McLavick, that it's a small area of 2,300 square feet, not just feet. Those are my amendments. I think I'm comfortable making a motion to amend, to approve as amended, but I don't know if others have had a chance to review it.
these are January 10th only.
Yes.
I second.
Well, I started to look at it. I did not, but I noticed that my name was the only one that said Ms. Delicio. Everyone else had first and last name. Unclear why.
That's not true. It says Ms. Creighton, Mr. Gilbert.
It's changed. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Christine is correct on the issue, on the one that I'm looking at in the members present at the top.
Oh,
Just an oddity of the way the names are listed. Some names are listed first and last, and hers is listed as Ms.
yeah. Okay. I just made that modification.
I see that you are, yeah. These meeting notes, it is difficult to review them when they're not in the folder ahead of the meeting, or if they're in there an hour and ahead of the meeting, that's not when I'm reading them. So respectfully, if we could ask, perhaps determine a time by which they're going to be in the folder, and then we'll know to check.
Okay.
I mean, I can
So
look at these
let's-
right now. If other people can look, I don't mind reviewing these tonight. They are quite short, but as a practice, we're going to need a little more time before the meeting than just before to review the minutes.
I think, Ron, we did have something with Helene that we had talked about this before. I think it was the Thursday before the meeting.
Yes, I thought those were in there. So Sharon, I'll get with you this week and let's go over this, how these things are getting in there.
Okay,
Got to get them in ahead of time.
all right, I will.
I will, I'll get with Sharon, go over this with her. So at this point, we're only talking about the meetings of January 10th, and with the corrections from Sarah and Christina. Any other changes? Otherwise, I think we should vote them as amended. Any other members have a concerns? Okay, roll call vote on the accepting the meetings of January 10th as amended. Mr. Gilbert,
Yes.
Mr. Olney,
Yes.
Ms. Tenney,
Yes.
Ms. Creighton,
Yes.
Ms. Delicio,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
And I have
Okay, Sharon.
renamed that folder, that file, planning board minutes as amended.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other items not anticipated by the chair that the board would like to bring up? Sarah?
I would like to suggest that we write a formal, just an email request to the Board of Selectmen that we be allowed to use town council with, notice to the Board of Selectmen chair and the town administrator, and that we be allowed to use some of Sue's budget for that purpose. And then that's the first thing. And then the second thing is whether we should, a discussion about whether or not we should request specific town council funds in the budget process. So those are two separate things. I don't know if we need a motion on the first, but
It's just to send an email.
Is there a way that we could do a little quick research to figure out how much we spent in legal fees as the planning board in the last 3 years, so we could not just be guessing on how much we spent?
There's a long history of us having direct access to town council. We have the towns paid for it year after year after year in the past. And because of the fear of constructive approval of applications, it has always proven to be necessary. So there's plenty of data information that can be dug up.
I don't think, that's not my question. I'm just wondering an amount. How much have we spent?
Yeah,
So
there
we
was a
can-
normal budget. Every year, we used to have a certain amount of money targeted for this, and I think we never exceeded it from what I recall. Ron
So how do
has,
we find that number is what my question is.
Well, Sue, do you have a number in mind, what you would have been asking for?
No, that was before me, and my professional services budget was not strictly
Was
for
not true.
that. So there
I
was
think
a
we can research. Yeah, go ahead.
there was a short time where that I know that the planning board was charged for specific services, but then I think it fell through the cracks. So there was enough difference. It was hard to figure out who was asking or who it benefited. The answer benefited. So for the last several years, the planning board has not received any invoices for town council services. So Andrea may be able to have some accounting of who requested and whose dime, which department requested it, but I do not, the planning board has not received anything in a number of years to determine what has been spent. So
Do we know what town council charges per hour?
A lot.
I'm guessing 225 or something. It's a guess. I think maybe 225.
So maybe if we could figure how many hours we might need based on our schedule of meetings. I don't know, to try to come up with a budget.
So all I'm thinking is when they invoice us, they have to say what they reviewed, right? So there should be some kind of coding.
Yeah, they're not
I can-
invoicing the board, so Andrea
Correct.
may have an answer to that. I'm happy to ask her if she does.
I
Great,
can
thank
ask
you.
her tomorrow. I can
Okay.
ask Andrea tomorrow.
Thanks, Sharon.
Okay.
Sarah and Laura both have their hands up. Ron.
Okay, Laura, go ahead.
Following on Christine's question, if we had a number, sort of, annual number allowance that we predicted that the general counsel fees would amount to, maybe that would give the Board of Selectmen some assurance that it's a modest number. I hesitate to dip too much into Sue's consultant budget. If it's modest, that's fine. I certainly think we'll have other priorities for our consultant budget as well, other than asking questions of the town council, which seems like should be a resource to us as we're trying to get timely answers on ANRs and other things like that. So I think that was a good suggestion, and hopefully one that the town can find ways to fund without necessarily dipping into our special consultants budget.
Thank you, Laura and Sarah.
Yeah, I think the issue is we want be able to get timely advice. Whether it's in our budget or somebody else's budget is not what I think the idea of having our own budget was, could we subvert the requirement to go through the Board of Selectmen? But I think the chairman has just indicated that that's not the case, no matter whose budget it is. So I think the real issue is we'd like to be able to have timely response because of the timelines. So that's really, to me, the issue. The second thing is we have no way of knowing what's going to come before us that are tricky situations. So I think it's, you do your best to make a best guess of how, 20 hours or some number if a budget needs to be set. And then thirdly, if we want to have a budget for next year, we need to submit something to the FinCom and the planning and the Board of Selectmen ASAP, because these budgets are being worked on immediately. So I think if we want to ask for something, we should pick an amount and they can turn us down. But the point is we need access to legal advice in a timely way. So I don't know how we get there.
Okay, Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Ron. Just so the planning board understands, I'm going to make sure that this gets onto our agenda for Monday.
Right.
Having a figure based on past use, that would be really helpful. But it's not absolutely necessary, but it would be really helpful. And FinCom is planning on voting out the entire budget. I believe at their meeting on Wednesday, March 9th.
Well, we have to do it then. Do it quickly. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Jakes.
Hi there. Sorry about that. I did, prior to the town planner being hired, the planning board did have a line budget for town council, and that might help to access that in terms of how that was utilized.
Okay, yeah. Sue, could you check on that? Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to make a motion that we request, given the time frame here, that we ask the Board of Selectmen to, that the chair write an email to the Board of Selectmen, as we've articulated, indicating the need for timely legal advice and requesting a town council budget of $3,000 or the amount that we can find from a prior year. What if we can find such amount? And then the Board of Selectmen at least has a starting point. It's within the time frame that can get acted on. And if their policy evolves to the point where we can get access in a more timely way, then that might help as well. But at least to keep this moving, I'm making that motion.
Is there a second to that motion?
So I just am a little concerned about the number. That's 1 hour a month. Do we think 3,000 is enough?
Well, if it's $2.25 an hour,
As I recall, Ron, it was more around 12,000, but I could be off. And I know there are records, not that high, Sue says. I know there are records, regular records year after year, Becky Jakes may recall, where there was a budget allowed.
May I make a suggestion that we give a range and we'll follow up with a number?
I'm looking for my town reports right now.
I don't think that's gonna be enough time. I mean, I think we need a number by Wednesday or the 9th.
So that
I
we,
don't think- Can we just double it to at least 6,000? That seems
yeah,
more reasonable.
I would do that. I would make it even 10,000 if we could.
well, I'll modify my motion to say $10,000 or the amount that was reflected in the last year that the planning board had a town council budget.
That sounds good. Thank you. Second.
Okay,
With 2
10,000.
hands from the Board of Selectmen, Ron.
Sorry, Mr. Turner. Am I seeing these hands went away?
Passed.
It's okay. See any other hands raised? Am I missing? Ms. Harrison, sorry. You're on mute, man.
Thank you. The town council provides regular, very detailed bills. To ask Andrea, she will have the breakdown. She's probably pretty busy right now, but ask Andrea, and then we can consider your proposal in light of her number for the amount that you're currently spending. And yeah, that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Ann. Okay, so are you going to amend, Sarah, your motion now?
Yes, I did. $10,000 or the amount that was last spent by the planning, that was last budgeted the last time the planning board had this budget.
And I seconded it.
And authorizing the chair to send an email to that effect.
Okay, motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Gilbert,
Absolutely.
Mr. Olney,
Yes.
Ms. Creighton,
Yes.
Ms. Tenney,
Yes.
and Ms. Delicio.
Yes.
Okay, chair votes yes. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll take a motion.
One more thing, sorry. It came up a number of times based on the, we've had a couple of requests from the same person about this issue of financial analysis about the zoning changes. So I simply was going to suggest that that the board agree that Chris and I could write an email to the finance committee and go and do a similar presentation to them that we did to the Board of Selectmen, and that remind folks that the requirement in the general bylaws is simply that the finance committee take it up in a public meeting, not a financial analysis as has been suggested by the correspondence, but she is correct that the general bylaws do provide for these provisions to be reviewed by the Finance Committee. And also, I think it's good practice for us. We would to let them know. So with everybody's permission, we can try to make that happen. I don't think we need a vote.
Any comments, any problems with the board having Sarah and Chris present to the Finance Committee?
That
Okay,
sounds good.
have at it. I don't think I need to vote. Laura?
My hand's up for another reason, so.
So without hearing any objections from the board, I don't think we have to vote on it. Have at it, Sarah and Chris. And I guess you'll be dealing with your husband. Okay, Laura.
Ron, thanks. Back to the LCD for a minute. We talked about the zoning, proposed zoning changes tonight, and the controls over development that we are trying to put into place so that we make sure the development is of the character we want and achieves the uses that we want. In our previous LCD studies, there was discussion, that the town has done through the master planning and so forth. There was discussion of design guidelines, potentially developing design guidelines, and I know MAPC often helps with those. And Sue, when you mentioned your consultant budget, I wonder if, this might be something that we could look at once we get through some of the work that we're doing now, but as a kind of second leg to the stool here for the LCD, developing design guidelines could address many of the comments that we've heard. I know some of the comments that we've discussed as a planning board about scenic overlays and other environmental protections. So I'd like to put that on a future agenda, put that on a possibility of design guidelines for the LCD in particular.
Thanks.
Okay.
Ron?
Good point. I think it's a good idea. Sarah, Sue, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so we have draft design guidelines for the LTD at the moment. They imagine or are developed with the thought that it would be a mix of uses. But I think we can comb through those and maybe use some additional budget to change those if we think that it's not likely to be a mix of uses, but rather all commercial. So that's a good.
And did they get into actual dimensional requirements and some of the sort of site specific issues?
Yes, generally did, and they are all in the SharePoint folder under I think it's called LCD. Let's see what it's under. I think it's LCD overlay district, formerly 40R. So you can find the design guidelines in there. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, if it seems that we are expanding a use of the lab and science program and the LCD was more towards a mixed use, then perhaps it would be good to take a look at refreshing or revising the design guidelines.
Idea.
That's a good idea.
Thank you.
Okay. Just before we ask for adjournment, we are going to meet on the 7th. Do we think we need to have a working meeting on the 7th, which will be a week from today, and it'll be with the selectmen, it'll be on the same channels. I don't know, but we don't want.
I think given that the Board of Selectmen is having this 40A hearing, I think we should not conflict with that.
Okay.
Right.
So
we'll get back to, I think we're going to have to maybe have it, whatever the meeting is between the 14th and the third Monday of the month is what I'm guessing.
We have three regular meetings left before annual town meeting. So the 14th, 28th, and the 11th of April. And then we have town meetings.
Yeah,
So,
we're going to need another.
we need to squeeze something in there. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's stay tuned but let's try to get something out there if we have to advertise. Sharon George, do we need to re-advertise because it's 8 o'clock instead of 7? No, we don't, right? Because we're just continuing.
You can say to 8 o'clock in the motion.
Okay.
You
I
put
think we
down
did.
to 3:14, but I can put down 3:14 at 8 PM.
Okay, great. Okay, I think we've cleared everything up as mud tonight, but
I move we adjourn the meeting.
is there a second?
Second,
Roll call vote, Mr. Delicio,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert,
Yes.
Mr. Olney,
Yes.
Ms. Tenney,
Yes.
Ms. Creighton.
yes.
Okay, we're adjourned. See you next time.
Thank
Thank
you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Karen.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Night.
Good night. Ron.